Well, hey everyone. Thanks for joining us on our midweek podcast, Digging Deeper for this week. So I am here with two wonderful women, and both their names start with T's. And so I'm here with Tawny and Teresa. Thanks for being here, you guys. So we're going to talk about mothering. And, we had Mother's Day, and it was just a great video. And did you guys have a chance to watch that video?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did.
Oh my gosh.
I didn't want to, but yeah.
Yeah, so Tawny was one of the moms on there that was interviewed, and I just so appreciated the vulnerability that each mom shared. You know what I mean? We had Chelsea, who was talking about being in a home with five kids, like crazy blended family, and her just being honest about that. And and then we had Stephanie talking about how her first high school senior, and she didn't mention this, but Faith, her daughter, is actually valedictorian and was going to give a speech at the graduation, and just how they were processing that she wouldn't be walking and all of that, which is crazy. And then we had Eileen, as she was going to have an anniversary, her 60th anniversary with her kids, and then we had you, Tawny, and I so appreciate what you shared just about how mothering has been difficult. And so anyways, super blessed by that. But why don't you both just share, what kind of mothers you both have been, as far as just your, I know you both have done foster, you both have biological kids, you've had foreign exchange students. So let's start with you, Teresa. What different mothering titles have you had in the past 20 years?
Yeah, I think 21 years.
Wow.
So we have 5 biological kids that run from the age of 21 to 17, including a set of twins. Then we have a 10-month-old that we have legal custody of, that she's been with us since she was 2 days old. We've had, I think, 7 kids that were either in foster care or safe families when they stayed with us. We've had 26 foreign exchange students that have been with us anywhere from 1 month to 3 years, depending on their program. And then we've had just a few kids that have kind of couch surfed or moved in when we were out of town and stayed for a while, that kind of thing. So we've had approximately 40 plus kids that we've had the privilege to parent in some way.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's super cool. What about you, Tawny?
Well, we have 3 biological kids, and then we did foster care for 5 years and had, I think, 12 more kids during that time. And then we adopted one of those kiddos, so we have 4 kids now. Okay. So I've never done foreign exchange student, so
experience.
Wow, I bet. And then for me, I obviously have not had any children, Lord willing one day, but I've had the privilege of just being small group leader to some middle schoolers, and that was a crazy experience. And then just being a small group leader to some high school kids, and so it's been an enormous privilege to, I guess, be a spiritual parent. But then, at the end of the day, they go somewhere else, and then you get to go home and not have to do any of the discipline stuff. And so I'm thankful. No, I'm just kidding. But so what would you ladies say has been the most rewarding part of parenting, and some of the more difficult parts? And this might take up a pretty large part of our discussion. So do either of you want to jump into that?
Sure, I'll share. So I would think that my most difficult part of parenting has definitely been being able to step back and let my kids fail and go through the experiences in life that they need to go through. I think as a parent, we try to protect our kids and shelter our kids, especially someone like me that has a lot of trauma in their past. Mm-hmm. I want to protect my kids from those things, but having to learn the lesson that our kids all have a journey that they have to go on, and that it's God's responsibility to walk with them through what they need to go through, and not mine to protect them from it, is really hard. To realize that I can let them make mistakes and try things while they're in my home, or I can make them wait until they move out and then not have that kind of guidance and protection of being under my house while they're going through their trials. That was a hard lesson to learn, really.
Yeah, me too, Teresa. That's been the hardest thing with my kids directly. But I think another difficult thing for me has been, like, when you have kids, some of the stuff you thought you had healed from or thought you were over, it all comes rising back up, and then you have to deal with your kids and your old junk from your own childhood. So that was also a difficulty, but it's a good thing.
Really.
Wow. Yeah. So how does, like, what do you do, Tawny, when maybe a kid of yours, or for either of you, you know, triggers maybe trauma or something from your past? How do you handle that? How do you process that?
Well, it depends on how full of the spirit I am or not. It could look really different on different days. But basically, it just, you got to think about it and face it and work on it, because if we don't change, the situation's not going to change, and we can't do a good job parenting when we're all caught up in our own pain. We have to work through it so we have something to offer our kids.
Right. I think most of mine has triggered fear in my parenting, just fear that they're going to be hurt in some way, or that I'm not doing a good enough job, or that I'm not protecting them. So having to find a way to just kind of release that fear and know that it's not ultimately my job to protect them from everything that's going to happen is hard. So yeah, I think that's what has been most kind of like coming from my past and my childhood, has just been fear that they're going to have to relive some things that I did.
I would say the same thing. It's fear. And probably the way the fear looks is manifest in different ways, but because I tend to go from fear to anger, which can get pretty volatile and not pleasant.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. Yeah. So how have you seen maybe God's grace in that, just as a parent? How has that just, comforted you, or has that been a journey of leaning into God's grace when they do make mistakes, or maybe when you see them making the same mistakes you made and then suffering from that, and like how does that play out?
It's been a learning process. I'd say I don't think I did it well the first couple times. I know our oldest daughter, we tease her that she was the first pancake, that she got flipped a little early. She might be a little burnt on one side, but we tried really hard. But yeah, I think the first couple times our oldest went through pain or struggles, I had more of the reaction of, I told you so. This is why you should listen to me. And so I tried to correct that and be a lot more empathetic. So we just really learned to lean into grace and empathy instead, and not having to be right, and realizing that it's okay in those moments to put off discipline and consequences for love and grace, and then just love them through it. And then eventually, like, okay, and we need to get around to the consequence for what's happened. But yeah, just learning to love and have empathy first as your first reaction was a really great step.
Wow. Yeah.
And kids are so forgiving. Like, if they know that you love them, I'm so thankful that God created forgiveness and commanded forgiveness, and kids are naturally so forgiving. Because I remember at one point, one of my kids said to me, because my husband's a wee bit impatient, and he knows this, so he won't mind me sharing it. But one of my kids was like, "Mom, I wish Dad was as patient as you are." And I just started laughing, because when they were little, Jason was more patient than I was. Like, I've grown so much in that my kids don't even remember when I was super, super impatient. So it's nice also that they don't remember everything from when they were tiny. God's grace.
Yeah. And as they get older and they can remember stuff, just saying you're sorry goes a really long way.
Oh man. Yeah. Yeah. So like, is that hard, to apologize to your kids? Like, do you think that was harder in the beginning than it is now? Or like that would be really humbling.
I think it's a hard practice to get into. But once you do it, it's amazing because you see your kids more willing to apologize. You're helping them learn empathy and compassion in the process. And so
Mm.
all around, it just becomes easier and it's good for the whole family.
Mm.
And it wasn't hard for me, but I think it's partly because my parents would never apologize, so I didn't want to be like them. So, but I also started telling my kids when they were young, only God is perfect. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to
Mm.
have days where I'm crabby for no reason. And I'm going to be mean sometimes when I shouldn't and impatient. Well, God's the only one that's going to be the perfect parent, So when I have to apologize, it was just kind of reinforcing that idea that I'm only a human too. So
Totally. Yeah. So like, in the teaching, my dad was talking about Romans 8 and talking about just how the sufferings at this present time are not worth, it's nothing compared to the glory revealed, that will be revealed in us. And yeah, like, would you both agree that he was saying that mothers have to suffer a lot? And that's just like almost like, this might sound a little morbid, but if you see the word mom in the dictionary, like definition is like sufferer, but not in like a super like demeaning way, but like there's a like there's a lot of suffering that comes in the title, I think, of being a mother, not just and I know men can feel very deeply too, but just moms, the child is a part of you, and then the child comes into the world, and then like a mother hen, you're trying to, like you both said, trying to protect them from things, but having wisdom in that too, that they have to feel their own pain, and you can't protect them from suffering. So would you both say that moms have to suffer a lot more than other people, or is like what do you ladies think about that?
I think there's just a lot of opportunities to die to yourself, and not all women take them. I mean, I've seen, and I'm sure Teresa with the foster care, so it's like there's moms out there that don't suffer for their kids. Like they don't put their kids first. But I think if you're somewhat healthy, and especially if you're trying to follow Jesus, there's just lots of opportunities to die to yourself and to do things without recognition or apparent appreciation. So you take care of your kids their whole lives, and they start to appreciate you, when they're in their 20s, maybe, if you're lucky. So
Yeah. I think moms just have most moms have an innate ability to put their children first, because you really are just have part of you out there walking around in the world, but also moms have the tendency to work so hard at putting their kids before them that they completely push themselves back and don't take care of themselves.
Wow.
And I think it's really important for moms to think about that taking care of themselves and having really great self-care and self-love actually is caring for their children. Because if you allow yourself to only pour out for your kids and only pour out for your family and suffer for them, you're depleting yourself, and you're becoming more irritable, and you're becoming more crabby, and you're losing your ability to do those things well. So I think part of, suffering for your family is remembering that you also have to fill yourself back up, or you just get yourself in this cycle where you're just getting deeper and deeper, and it's hard to crawl out of that.
Well, and I think you can't get so caught up in your kids that you lose who you are as a person as well. Like, we're women, and part of God's kingdom, we have there's more to us than just being moms. And if we lose all the rest of our identity, and then our kids move away, that can be really painful too.
Right.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. So it's almost like almost like anything in life, there's a balance there. 'Cause if you throw yourself into your kids. And then, like you were saying, Teresa, forget yourself and forget that there are things that the Lord is doing in your life outside of just your relationship with your kids, you know? And I'm sure also there's the flip side of like, maybe obviously neglecting your kids is never okay. And so it's almost just like there's a balance there, like anything in life, you know?
Absolutely.
So what about just rewards of being a mom? What are ways maybe that God has been able to just do some super cool things just in your parenting or as a mom? Yeah, any stories or anything that you know comes to your mind when you're thinking about just how God rewards you in mothering?
Sure, I have a funny one. So, we've had 40 some odd kids in our home. Kind of been, this is life with us. This is just reality. When somebody needs a place to be, our home is always open. And we joke that we run a teenage refugee camp.
Oh my gosh.
I think 2 years ago, Frank and I were on vacation for our anniversary. We were out of the country. And while we were gone, our second oldest daughter had a friend who was kicked out of her home and had nowhere to go. And she just moved her in. Like, she just moved her into the
Oh my
bedroom,
gosh.
gave her a place to be. And she's like, I know that you guys would have said yes if you were here. You would
Oh.
have never let my friend live on the street. And so to us as parents, that was so rewarding to know that they were paying attention, and that they were wanting to live that life of service and just caring about people. That was just one of our proudest moments as parents, to just see that, to see like what we're trying to instill in them, without harping on them, just like, that modeling of care and compassion and loving on people, to see that in action in our kids. And that's just one example. Our kids are really fabulous with compassion and love. And now I'm going to cry because it's like, it's one of my favorite mom moments.
Wow. That's
Most people would think you moved somebody in while I was out of the country. Are you kidding? In our home, that's pretty normal. So
Teresa, that's amazing. Oh my gosh. Wow. Ha! Okay, I'm gonna start crying. Wow, that was amazing. Huh.
Well, for me, one of my most favorite things in life now is when all my kids are home. Like, my husband always takes 2 weeks off for at Christmas time, and not this past year, but the year before, all the kids were on break from college, and my daughter had just gotten married. So for like 2 weeks, we were all home in our pajamas, watching movies, playing games, cooking big breakfast, and it was just, it's so fun because we all know each other so well. We can completely be ourselves, and it's just so relaxing and comfortable and sweet. And so at one point, my kids were cleaning the kitchen for me, and I was like, I love adult children. The adult children makes it all worth all the work,
Oh,
and all the horrible years. So anyway.
wow. That's so cool. Yeah, just I think as a small group leader with some of the girls just growing up through Midway and CAD, it's so cool when things like just start to click for them, like when they start to really, like, you tell them God loves you so much and nothing can separate you from the love of Christ, and they're like, yeah, and then pick up their phone, blah, blah, blah. But and you continually tell them and you keep telling them, and they maybe kind of get it sometimes, maybe not, but then like sometimes there's those moments when they like get it, and it is so cool. And I'm sure maybe for both of you as like parents, like seeing your kids when they start to actually like scripture starts to just it starts to be water to their souls, like finally, like, and it's not just you giving them the water, but then they're seeking the water, and they're like letting themselves just take truth in, and so I don't know, I think those moments when things start to really click for the kids, and it's not like you really did anything, you just kind of continued to share truth that God was putting on their heart, but then God kind of allowed them to start seeing the truth in their own lives. And so those are really powerful moments.
definitely, yeah.
So Tawny, you had mentioned a little about your own parents, and just a little bit of, I think you said something like they hadn't really ever expressed apologies to you or anything. Do you want to share a little just about how, I don't know, how life was when you were a kid, and how that manifests itself now in your own parenting?
Well, that's been an interesting part of my journey as well, because I've mentioned before I was raised in a really legalistic religion, and then my parents were also very controlling. So just everything was very controlling, and but my mom and I have really different personalities. Like, she just wants there to be peace, where I want things to be correct.
Hmm.
And so we argued a lot, and then my dad and I argued as well. And then so I did not want to raise my kids the same way that I was raised. I wanted to raise them differently, and I think I probably did swing a little bit too much the other direction, and probably gave them more freedom than I should have.
Mm.
But I was a lot like what Teresa was saying. I wanted them to be able to make mistakes when they were still at my house, so I could help them through it, versus wait until they were in college and then just go do everything they want anyway. And I didn't want to control them through fear. I wanted them to have the freedom to really be who they were, and not have to adapt to my idea of who they should be. And also I wanted them to do things freely out of love, not because they were afraid of what would happen if
Mm.
they disobeyed me or disagreed with me. And so I kind of felt like I didn't have any guidance being a mom, because all I knew is what I didn't want to do. And then I kind of hated Christian parenting books, because they all said different things, and it was really frustrating. And the last one I read, when my kids were like school age, young elementary, I think I kind of threw the book around across the room, was like, okay, Lord, it's me and you. You're going to have to help me be a mom, because none of these books agree with each other, and I need you to help me anyway. So, Holy Spirit, to help me be a mom. And then I just want, had to wing it from there.
Oh
So,
my gosh. Yeah. Teresa, what, I mean, and only share whatever you feel comfortable with, but I know that, growing up definitely was um, a traumatic experience in some ways, for you. How uh, was that, kind of, and I know we talked about that a little earlier, but the parenting you were given, did it take a long time to just heal from that? Is that still a process? What does that look like for you?
Sure. So, I don't know. I don't necessarily connect my trauma with how I was parented.
Hmm.
I think that I don't want to say it was self-inflicted trauma, but a lot of it happened in my teens, and just times where I was being quietly rebellious and putting myself in really bad situations. But in a way, it did affect my parenting, because my parents both worked. They did shift work. My dad was a police officer. My mom worked at a hospital. And I was 5 years older than my siblings. So my parents were either gone at work, sleeping during the day, or, that kind of thing. So I did a lot of taking care of my siblings, a lot of babysitting, a lot of just kind of getting them to the bus stop, that kind of thing in the morning. And so I didn't, not necessarily subconsciously, but the choice to be a stay-at-home mom and homeschool my kiddos and really be there with them. It wasn't like a thumbing at my parents like, oh, you weren't there for me. I think it was subconscious, just that desire to be at home and almost protect and feel like I could kind of wall them in and, keep the outside world out and nurture them. I think that's definitely something I did, but not intentionally, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I definitely kind of went the other direction, but I didn't do it on purpose.
Yeah.
So,
Interesting. Huh.
yeah.
Do you ladies think that there's a lot, I mean, you brought up the Christian parenting books, Tawny, and like, do you ladies think there's a lot of, well, actually, two-part question. So first off, uh, maybe a lot of misconceptions out there, not just secular misconceptions, but even in the Christian world. And I know everyone's well-intentioned, but
Mhm.
uh, do you think there's misconceptions out there with parenting, that maybe stuff you've heard that you're like, ugh, like that will not work for my kids, or like, stuff you hear, maybe cliches with parenting that you're like, I do not agree with that. I don't know if I don't know if that's how I want to raise, my kids, or I don't know if that's biblically accurate. Like, can you ladies think of misconceptions you've picked up on that you maybe, have spent some time unwinding, or I don't know?
Well, I think the biggest misconception out there, kind of like Tawny said with the books, is that there's one method that's going to work for every family and
Mm.
every child. Even within a family, you're going to have to parent each kid individually. They're all different. And what worked for that kid this week might not work for that kid next. You have to be flexible. And you just have to realize that this is a learning process along with your children. And what the experts say might have worked fabulous with their kids, but that doesn't mean it's working with everybody's children.
Oh.
And just the ability to have grace and respect for other parents and the journey that they're on is so different than yours, and the journey that their kids are on is so different than your kids. It's, and I teach parenting classes, I
Mhm.
teach parenting classes and tell parents, do these things with your kids. But I try to give a lot of examples of this might work with your kid, but if that doesn't, try this.
Mm.
It's almost trial and error sometimes. You might look at one thing and say, oh yeah, that's definitely not going to work with my kid. But some things you might not know until you've tried it,
Hmm.
whether it's going to work or not. So yeah, I definitely think just that grace of, just because I'm doing it differently than you doesn't mean I'm doing it wrong.
So well said. Wow. What about you, Tawny?
Well, I think there's a myth that says if you're a good enough parent, you can save your children's soul all on your own without Jesus. And it's not true. But I think we kind of feel it and believe it. Like, if I'm a good enough mom and my husband's a good enough dad, then our kids will just grow up and be perfect people, and they'll have perfect lives, and then we'll all live happily ever after. And that's just like not true.
Hmm.
So I think we're all people under God's grace trying to figure out what it means to live well and follow Him. And there's all sorts of surprises and bumps in the road. And we just have to keep looking to God and praying and learning how to love each other. And I think it's important to learn how to love our kids when they're not doing what we want, when they're not. I mean, sometimes I think about, like, how is God still loving humans? Because we can get so disappointed with our kids, and then but we have to disappoint God so much more, so there's just a lot of spiritual lessons to be learned. And if it all went smooth and perfectly the way we want it to, there's just so much we would miss out on
Hmm.
in the lessons that we can learn from being parents.
Yeah.
Hmm.
There's one other misconception that I'd love to talk about, and that's from a Christian parenting standpoint. I know a lot of parents, and I, Frank and I definitely did this in the beginning, that you feel like you can kind of put your kids in this little box and protect them from the outside world, that you can put a little hedge of protection around them, keep out the worldly influences, keep out sin, keep out, all those things. But what you forget about is that your kid's a human. They have sin in them.
Hmm.
They don't have to get it from outside. You can't protect sin out of your kids. You can't.
Hmm.
You can protect them from watching television and going to public school and having friends that aren't Christian, and but they're still humans, and they
Hmm.
still have that ability to fail and to sin, and it's internal. Those, sure, it's great to protect our kids from bad influences, but you can't be such a perfect little Christian unit that nothing's going to get in because it's already there, you know.
Wow. Yeah, so well said. I think something I was thinking of is, I think, and I don't know if this is a temptation for parents to think or not, but I do think that more than you, than as a mom and as a dad, like you're not the only one who's supposed to raise your kids. And I know that, like, for me, I mean, my parents were great, like not perfect, but very, like, they were wonderful. But like, I think the church raised me and my siblings. And, we were in and out of so many life groups. As when we were starting life groups like years ago, my parents were in a lot of different ones, and we heard so many different testimonies of people, following the Lord and what God had done in their life. And like, yeah, my parents would give us tips on following the Lord. But then when we saw other people doing it, it almost was like, you're sometimes when you're a kid, your parents aren't that cool. But when your small group leader tells you, hey, God, you need to follow him. He's, you're like, oh, there's other cool people out there following the Lord. And, and so I think that, sometimes parents might think it's all up to me. It's all up to me and God. And like, yeah, a lot is like, it's important to take that job seriously, but you need other people in the church helping raise your kids. And I think that even, Paul, we don't know if he had any biological kids, but he always called Timothy his son, and he called Titus his son. And so I just think that is like, just so cool how it does take a village, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
well, I think, go ahead, Teresa.
I was just going to say they need healthy mentors. Sometimes you can say the same thing over and over and over to your kid and they'll just blow you off.
Yeah.
And then, another adult that they respect will say exactly what you just said. And our kid will come just like, oh my goodness, you wouldn't believe what so-and-so said to me. It's like mind blowing. And yesterday, but
you're like,
I take that personally and just be like, yeah, that's awesome. I'm gonna celebrate with you that you're finally hearing the thing that I said 5 times from somebody else. That's great.
That's so funny. Yeah.
Well, and another thing that's interesting to me as I get older is the way we love people gets more similar. Like, the way we love our kids and our spouses and our friends and our brothers and sisters in Christ and our siblings and our parents, like, love just starts to just be love and not have so many categories. And I think the more we learn to love other people in Christ, like, there's so much we can offer each other. And I'm so thankful for the other adults in my kids' life that have loved them well and spoke truth into their life and supported them. And with all of our different personalities, like, one of my kids is really close to my sister, and one of her kids is really close to me. And we're just happy about that, that there's just, I think the more people that's available to love our kids and us and each other, it just is really cool. And that's one of the best things about being part of God's family.
That's really neat. Yeah. We posted on the women's Facebook page yesterday, what's something you've learned as a parent, and kind of going off what you were saying, Teresa, like, or I think both of you alluded to this, but the comparison game. And I think that, like, so many women, and it wasn't spiteful, but just like, don't compare. Your kids are different. They have different experiences. Like, there's different wirings. And I think that I'm not a parent, but I can't imagine how difficult that would be, to not to compare, your child and their accomplishments to your friend's child or your sister's child and her accomplishments and how quickly she does her chores and what college degree she got. I can't even imagine.
I think social media has been really detrimental to us in that way, especially as moms,
Yeah.
that we see the little snapshot of perfection that somebody chooses to share out of their day. Just that little window, but you don't see the chaos that's going on around them. You don't see the 20 photos it took to get that perfect photo. You don't
Wow.
see the meltdown that the kid had, 5 seconds after you snap the picture, and,
Oh.
aftermath of everything that happened. You just see that little snapshot of perfection, and
Hmm.
you think that, oh, their whole life is like that. And it's we're so hard on ourselves as moms to want to be perfect,
Oh man.
and what we perceive as perfection in other people, um,
Hmm.
is we take that to heart, and we shouldn't. And we should remember that they're just as human as we are. They're just choosing to share that little bit with us, and that's a hard thing to catch on to, and not to compare yourself to.
Sheesh. Yeah.
I think I saw a meme on social media that said something like, don't compare your worst moments to someone else's highlight reel. And
Hmm.
I think that's what we tend to do with social media.
Totally. Well, I think even, I interact a lot with single people who really want a spouse and really want a family. And, us single people can look at these pictures of family game nights and look at that and be like, man, I want that, and you're at home alone, and you see their high and you're comparing that to your lowest moment. And again, like what you said, Teresa, like, you're not seeing that family game night ended in horror because so and so threw the dice at their little brother, blah blah blah. And
Yep.
I think also, I'm sure it's easy, for families or moms or a married couple to look at a single person as that single person is getting to travel the world and compare, and they're at home
Right.
with baby throw up on them. And I think, but that parent might not see the low moment of that single person eats a lot of meals alone and goes home to an empty house. And so I think that again, the social media, comparing my high or comparing my low to their high, like, I think it's so important for us just to be honest and vulnerable about the whole picture.
Absolutely.
So Teresa, what made you and Frank want to dive into parenting classes? I know that Frank has talked a lot about those, and super cool. It looks like you guys get a pretty good showing at those. What made you guys want to do that?
So I feel like we just really wanted to help people be more prepared, in all honesty. Frank talks a lot about just kind of how he feels like his parents didn't have anybody that was a great role model. They tried really hard to do their best. But they didn't have healthy people in their life to show them how to do things. We had parents, but we wanted to do things differently. Frank struggled a lot in the beginning of our parenting, just because we were so young, and just kind of doing that trial and error. And we really wanted to be kind of the people that could be there for somebody like us when we were young, and just not, I don't know how to put this in a way that, often you'll go to a parenting class or you'll read a book or something, and they're the expert. They know how to tell you to do it right. And if you just follow them, your kid's going to be perfect, and just do these steps. And we really wanted to be the opposite of that. We wanted to be the people that got up there and were really all open and honest with their lives and their kids and their struggles and our failures and our successes, and normalize parenting, and normalize the idea of taking classes, and for us not to be up there and say, we're the expert, you need to listen to us, but be okay, here's what we've done. Here's what we've done really well. Here's what we've done and it really failed. But just kind of sharing those experiences to help other people through. We want people to know that they're all on the same page, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I know we have a lot of people that come to our classes that are mandated by the state, because they have child welfare services involved with their family. But at the same time, we have parents that are going through just because they want a little extra help. And to us, it's a fabulous relationship, because we want, you know, the parents that are DHS involved to see that there are other parents out there struggling just like them. You know, that we're all in the same boat. Some of us just need a little extra help, and some of us are just barely keeping our heads above water, you know, just kind of that getting rid of those barriers of you have to be a perfect parent on your own, or you have to be an expert to have great kids. You know, we just want it to be reality.
Wow, that's super cool. Is there any like common thread or things that every single parenting class this main problem comes up, or like you keep like you're on repeat almost every time, like any of those?
Definitely finding the right way to bring balance and discipline into your home. And one of the things that we work on a lot with parents is having house rules, but having just a few house rules. Giving your kids something that they can actually accomplish, and not have this list of like 30 things that is a rule in your house, but have 5 to 10 things that are really important to you as a family, and have them positive, you know. So when you're a little kid, instead of saying no running in the house, a positive rule would be, you know, we walk in the house. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So trying to keep, not always making everything negative for your kids,
Yeah. It's
but
like,
making it positive, so that they're actively working towards a positive goal versus trying to avoid a negative goal.
yeah.
Bringing that positivity into their home, but also having consequences for breaking the rules set out ahead of time. Because I think with parenting, where we struggle is we get so upset, and then we try to dole out a discipline or a consequence in the heat of the moment. And that's where parents often kind of lose their control of the situation, because they're upset, the kid's upset, you know, and now you have to figure out how to discipline the child that disobeyed. So if you have those things kind of out and ready ahead of time, there's this expectation that if you break this rule, this is your consequence, and you know that ahead of time. It makes you not have to be the bad guy as the parent. The rule is the bad guy. You don't have to think on your feet when you're angry or frustrated. You already have something set up ahead of time, and it helps stop a lot of kind of train wrecks in their place a little bit. I mean, obviously there are things that happen that you can't prepare for, but being prepared for some of them is really helpful.
So, wow, interesting. The rule is the bad guy. I liked that. It's not me, it's the rule.
Sorry, I just rule and you broke it.
Oh, yeah. One more question that I was thinking of, how has parenting, how has that been when, you know, as you're also a spouse and you're a team with your husband, you know, what does that look like? Tawny, let's start with you. Is that tough? Is that kind of, you know, hasn't been hard? I mean, what's that like?
Well, and with me and Jason, it's been a journey, and we've changed a lot through the years. We went from me feeling like, you know, he wasn't involved enough, to me thinking he was okay, never mind, too involved. But we've both grown, and I've learned to trust that sometimes, and I don't know if this is a man-woman thing or just a Jason and Tawny thing, but sometimes he would be harder on the kids than I would think he should be. And after a while, I started to see that he was right, that, you know, that I was underreacting more than he was overreacting. And that was just our kind of process we went through. But I think it's definitely a big issue in a marriage. Like, I think, you know, discipline and finances and who has to wash the dishes every night. Those were like the 3 areas that we found we had to really kind of wrestle through. And talking to different couples, I know that that's usually 3 big areas that you really have to listen to each other and hear each other's hearts and points of views, and sometimes learn to compromise in and trust each other in. but I think remembering that you are supposed to be a team, that you are supposed to, like, one of our rules was, if one of our kids came in and asked me and I said no, and then they went and asked their dad, they got in trouble. Like,
Okay.
we wouldn't allow our kids to play us against each other. And so, but then it kind of turned into a joke, because I'd always say ask your dad, and he would always say ask your mom, and they'd be like, we asked you both. We need an answer. So anyway, I think it's something that it's one of the harder issues, but if you remember that you're a team and figure out how to be a team, I think it works out well.
Definitely. Yeah, I would just say I think that communication is the biggest key. Leaving those lines of communication open, having great conversations, and having them ahead of time. You know, when we talk about things like having preset rules and consequences, having chore charts for the kids and the parents, things that are just kind of set up so you're not having to figure it out as you go. And another thing that we really learned was that not only are we a team, but we're also consider ourselves a tag team. So if it's really obvious that one of us is kind of hitting our threshold with a particular child or a particular behavior, the other is ready to like kind of tag in and like, you know, direct that parent like, hey, I'm going to take over this for a little while. Why don't you go take a breather? And that's something that we established ahead of time. So we didn't feel like the other person was undermining us, but we gave them that permission to say, you need to take a breather. I'm going to take over now. And the fact that we established that ahead of time, there wasn't any hard feelings or upset, you know, hurt through that. Because we wanted to make sure that we protected that relationship, parent relationship with our kids for each other. And usually when you're on the outside, you can see things hitting a boiling point before the person that's involved can.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and also understanding that we each are better with different age groups and different behaviors.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm not great with 12-year-old girls. I do not get along with 12-year-old girls. We just butt heads.
Yeah.
So knowing that there's a point in that girl's life where she needs to go to dad when she's misbehaving,
Yeah.
because we're just going to argue, you know, and him knowing that there are certain instances where the boys need to go to mom, because otherwise it's just going to be a competition of, you know, who's the more manly, you know, those kind of things.
Yeah.
Doing that as you go and not taking offense to it. But, you know, having great communication in that is key.
Yeah.
Well, Teresa, I wish we would have been able to take your parenting class. That would have been so wonderful. But for me and Jason, it was more like, okay, we keep having the same fight. We keep arguing about the same thing. So like you said, when we're not upset, to talk about it and say, okay, what's going on? How come we keep having the same conflict over and over, and then working through better ways of resolving it versus, I would have never thought to try and do it beforehand, but I guess if you just do it at a good time when you're both thinking clearly and can think through it rationally is a good idea.
Yeah. I just, and again, it's a little different, but you know, sometimes when kids will come to youth group, they have stories about their parents, and my parents did this, my parents did that. And I try to be on the same team as the parents. Like, again, like, you know, sometimes they share things and I'm like, oh, weird. That's that, you know, but I think that, you know, like my job isn't to badmouth the parents with the kids. Like, my job is to, like, how can we help, you know, and again, I'm only hearing one side, you know, and so, like, obviously if a kid comes and says something that is very serious, like, then, you know, stuff needs to happen. But I think that it can be easy maybe as a small group leader to hear something and be like, you know, wow, yeah, your parents, wow, they are terrible, blah, blah, blah. And like, that as leaders, that's never something we want to do. We want to, you know, be good listeners and try to ask good questions. And, you know, oh, I wonder why your mom was angry. Was it because, you know, your room has been messy for 2 weeks straight? Like, or was it because, like, you know, your dishes are sitting, you know, like, and, you know, it sounds like your mom, cooks 3 meals a day for you. Is she really as terrible as you say and so I think that it can be easy to fall into you know uh even just gossip with the kids, and that's like so not what our role is as youth ministry people. It's to help build relationships, help speak truth, and be good listeners, but sometimes it can be tempting when you just hear one side of the story, and so um
Perception is always very interesting when it comes from a teenage brain. They don't always.
I know. Well, and bless their hearts, but they'll use words like never or always or every time, and you're like, wow, every time. Okay. So, not to mention, I mean, there are kids that come with you um, with stories of, and you think, wow, their parents are like all of us, really broken people, and yeah, there's serious stuff going on in their households, and yeah, and again, if a kid is not in a safe situation, that's definitely stuff that we want to deal with, and I think the Lord gives us good discernment towards that. But I have noticed usually the kids that are really loud and very maybe dramatic or sensational about stuff they're sharing, it's usually the kids that are a little quieter that you're like, something doesn't seem right in their home lives, and then you try and investigate a little bit. But anyways, but it does take some discernment sometimes.
Well, one of my 19-year-old told me recently, he's like, Mom, kids always look at the one thing that the parents won't give them versus all the things that I can't remember how we got on this subject, but he's like, I realized I used to do that to you too. Just look at what you wouldn't give me instead of all the things that you did give me. And I think it's just kind of a normal part of development with teenagers, and just
Yeah,
to not take it personally sometimes.
for sure. I think even trying to have a good relationship with the parents, and getting to know them, and then they start to trust you, and then they start to maybe share stuff going on in the home. And I think it's a very rewarding thing to get to know yeah, just what's going on at home with kids in the youth group and stuff. I've always enjoyed getting to know parents, because then I start to understand them a little better. So all right. Well, you guys, any encouragement that you feel like maybe moms and GP need to know, or just moms in general need to know, or even encouragement for women out there that don't have kids and really would want kids one day, or I don't know, any encouragement that's kind of on your minds that you would want to share as we're just closing this out?
Do you want to go, Tawny?
Oh, you can go.
I would just say, as hard as it is to try to not feel like you have to be the perfect parent, that thing of, I have to protect my kid at all costs. I have to make the perfect lunch. I have to, give them the perfect outfits. I have to be that perfect mom. It's so unattainable, and you're just driving yourself crazy in the process. So just let go of perfection. One of the things that we talk about a lot in our classes and in our home is sometimes just choosing something to fail. So that for me, it might be, I totally just bombed on the laundry this week. And you know what? There's no clean towels. If you want a clean towel, go do a load of laundry, because I'm choosing to fail at that this week. Or I'm choosing to fail at dinner tonight and we're having pizza. Like,
not a failure. Pizza's great.
Giving yourself grace and not expecting perfection from yourself is just super important. And the other part, I have kind of realized, having another baby in the house now, that when my kids were little, I was always so focused on the next stage, like, hurry up and get over the middle of the night feedings. Hurry up and get over the crawling that I have to constantly carry you somewhere. Hurry up and get over the teething, all these things. Get over the tantrums. But this time around, I'm really just enjoying every single moment and every phase so much more. So just finding joy in the little phases, the things that might be stressful, like our little one threw her first temper tantrum the other day. which, you know, for some is kind of like, oh no, we're in the temper tantrum phase. And for me, it was more like, oh my gosh, she's learning to, you know, express her little opinion. And she's already starting to like look for autonomy in her life. And she's going to be such a, you know, strong little person. But finding joy in those little phases and enjoying them while they're there, because they're going to be gone so fast, you know, and when you look back, you think, oh, wow, they're so grown now, and I didn't get to enjoy, you know, when they just wanted to hold me and cuddle, and I had to carry them everywhere, and, you know, just find joy in the little stuff, even when it seems frustrating at 3:00 in the morning and they want to go, and, you know, that's my thing.
Yeah.
That's good.
And I would say to just always remember that God is with you, that you're not, because sometimes being a mom just feels so alone, and in the hard times can feel so powerless. But just to remember that we are still just God's kids, and he's looking out for us as we look out for our kids. And like Teresa said, there's good and bad in every phase, and the phases go so quickly, and to really enjoy it all. And another thing I've been thinking about lately is I've been listening to a book that a friend gave me to borrow, and it's actually about trauma, but it talks a lot about childhood trauma, and that you know, kids need a safe place. So maybe not like Teresa said, don't worry so much about things being perfect, but just them being safe physically, safe emotionally, safe spiritually, where they know that there's a place where they're loved and protected, even if the house doesn't look great and the outfits don't look great and the food doesn't look great, but it's safe, and everybody knows that they're loved and accepted and have room to make mistakes, and just enjoy what you can, and trust God with what you don't know what you're doing, and just trust that it'll all be okay. You will live through it if you're having a hard time.
Awesome. Wow. Ladies, thank you so much. I took notes, you guys. I got notes on here for one day. No, seriously, thank you so much. I so appreciate both of you sharing, and just very amazed the depth and the width of your mothering. Just both of you have been a mom to me in some ways. Well, we'll say big sister. You guys are both, you know. So I just appreciate you guys so much, and thanks for being on here today.
Well, and thanks for all you do too, Nat, because what you do with those girls makes a huge difference, because you're the cool one that they actually listen to.
Absolutely. You're the one they come home and say, oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe what Natalie told me today. It's so cool, Mom. Why don't you think this way? And it's good.
Oh, what they don't know is Nat doesn't cook, and so that's why Nat tries to spend time with Tawny and Teresa, and they can learn, so she can learn. So anyways, well, thanks Tawny for that. That's really sweet. It's a huge joy, and people did that to me and are still, you know, mothering me in ways, and it's a huge blessing to me. And so anyways, super fun. All right, you guys. Well, till next time, we'll see. We gotta have both of you ladies back. You guys are awesome. So thank you so much again.
All right, bye.
All right.